Hello, and welcome back to another Eduonics tutorial. In this section, we're going over effects and techniques in Photoshop. And in this video, we'll be going over how to create weather. I have an image here of a bunch of men with umbrellas. It looks like they're being tossed around by stormy conditions. But if we look around, there's no storm at all. In a good storm, there should be dark clouds, lots of rain, and lightning. Let's see what I can do to add all that to make this photo make a little more sense. I'll start by going down to the bottom of the Layers panel and creating a new blank layer. Now I'll go up to Filter, Render, Clouds. So this has added a render of clouds to my blank layer. I'll try to blend it with my background layer by going over to Blend Mode and switching it from Normal to Hard Light. Now I can actually see through my clouds, and they're interacting with my background layer. But perhaps this is too much. Clouds should probably stay in the sky where they belong. So I'll need to isolate the sky in my background layer. I'll hide my clouds layer and select my background layer. Since the sky is mainly just one color, I'll go over to my Tools panel, right-click my Quick Selection tool, and get my Magic Wand tool. Then I'll just click somewhere in the top of the sky. Alright, this might work. I just need to add the rest of the sky to this selection. To do that, I'll just press and hold the Shift key on my keyboard and continue to click in the sky. And I'll just keep holding the Shift key and keep clicking. I'll even select the clouds and try to fill the entire sky down to the horizon. Okay, that looks pretty good. This really doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm not even going to be using Refine Edge for this. I'll just go straight back to my Layers panel and show my Clouds layer again. Then, to use this selection I just made as a mask, I'll just select my Clouds layer and go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and click the Layer Mask button. Okay, now that my layer mask has been applied to my selection, it's only showing the clouds in the sky, just like I wanted. Now that I have the clouds in the sky, I should probably add some rain. I'll add a new blank layer, and this next effect requires that something be on the canvas before the effect will work. So I'll fill this layer with a solid color. I'll just go up to Edit, Fill, and it really doesn't matter what color I use. So I'll keep it at foreground color and click OK. Now to apply my effect, I'll go up to Filter, Render, Fibers. Here I have the Fibers dialog box. Unfortunately, Fibers does not allow me to preview the effect in the canvas. But I know that for rain, I want to set the variance to 50. And for the strength, I'll set that to 60. And click OK. Well, this doesn't look very much like rain. It looks more like static. This is because the edges are far too sharp and noisy to resemble actual soft drops of rain. What I'll have to do is I'll have to blur this. So I'll go up to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. And here, I'll set the distance to 180 to blur it. Okay, so it's blurring it, but it seems to be going horizontally. Rain goes vertically. So I'll fix the angle by setting that to 90 degrees. That's looking a little more like rain. I'll click OK to apply the motion blur. So my goal is to apply drops of rain in multiple different sizes. To do that, I'm going to need to make this rain into a pattern. But as is, this won't tile very well as a pattern, especially this spot up on top. I'm going to have to make the top match with the bottom. To view the top and bottom up against each other, I'll go up to Filter, Other, then I'll click Offset. And what this is doing is allowing me to wrap my layer around itself so I can see the top and bottom against each other. I'll just go to this vertical slider and slide that to the right. Now you can see the seam that the top and bottom would make if we tried to tile this. They don't seem to match very well. I'm going to drag this till I get to about 1,000 pixels down. And I'll click OK. I'm going to sample some other areas of this layer to paint over the seam in the middle. To do that, I'll go over to the Tools panel and get the Clone Stamp tool. I'll increase the size of the Clone Stamp tool by hitting the right bracket key. Then I'll just press and hold Alt on my keyboard and click to set my beginning sample. Now I'll just go to an edge of the layer and start painting in. You see that? The seam is just disappearing. I'll just continue using the Clone Stamp tool to paint over it until it's completely gone. Okay, that looks great. As is, this layer would just have too many drops of rain. So I'm just going to isolate a few drops with a levels layer. I'll go down to the bottom of the layers panel, click my new adjustment layer button, and I'll select levels. Then, to darken the layer and make just a few drops stand out, I'll go up to the levels histogram and drag the black tab to the right. And I'll just continue to drag this till the number below on the far left gets to about 150. Okay, now the layer is much darker and just a few drops are standing out, which is exactly how I need it. Now I just need to select those drops. So I'll go over in my Layers panel and switch it to my Channels panel. Now that I'm in my channels, I can select all the visible whites in the image by holding my Control key and clicking in my RGB channel. Okay, now I can switch back to my Layers panel. Then I'll go down to the bottom of the Layers panel and create a new blank layer. Then, with my selection still active, I'll fill it with white by going up to Edit, Fill, then under Use, I'll select White and click OK. Then I'll hit Ctrl D on my keyboard to deselect. Now that I have my white drops on their own layer, I can delete my original rain layer and levels layer. Okay, now I can see how my raindrops will look on my image. I'll proceed with making this into a pattern. I'll just hide my cloud layer and background layer, select my rain layer, and go up to Edit, Define Pattern. I'll go ahead and name this Rain and click OK. I'll show my cloud layer and background layer. Then I can delete my rain layer since I have it saved into Photoshop as a pattern preset. Now I'll get on with adding my rain as a pattern. I'll go down and create a new blank layer. Then I'll fill this layer by going up to Edit, Fill, and this time I'll use black and click OK. This is the layer I'll be applying the pattern to. So I'll go down and click the Layer Effect icon and select Pattern Overlay. From here, I can go to my pattern picker and click the last pattern on the list. This is my custom rain pattern. If I go here in the scale option, you can see that even when I scale this down, the pattern repeats without creating unpleasant tile edges. I'm going to go ahead and keep this down at 20% scale. Then, to blend it with my other layers, I'll go up to Blending Options on the top left. Then I'll go below the opacity to get to the fill opacity. And I'll bring down the fill opacity to 0%. Then I'll click OK to apply my pattern. I need to increase the size of my pattern, so I'll have to zoom out a little bit to give myself some more room. I'll just go over to my Tools panel, get my Zoom tool, and then I'll press and hold Alt on my keyboard as I click to zoom out. One click should do it. Now that I've zoomed out, I'll hit Ctrl T on my keyboard to bring up Free Transform. Then I'll go up in the tool options and I'll click the link between the width and the height to link the width and height together. Then I'll bring them both up to 125%. And I'll click the check mark to commit my transform. Now I have my template for my rain. So I'm just going to use this to add more rain layers with raindrops at different sizes. To duplicate this layer, I'll just press and hold the Alt key and I'll drag this layer up above itself. Now I'll double click the pattern overlay for my duplicate layer. Then I'll go down to Scale and increase that to 40%. Then I'll click OK to apply my pattern. I'm just going to repeat this process a few times to get a few patterns of different sizes. I'll hold Alt and drag this layer up above itself to duplicate it. Then I'll double-click Pattern Overlay, and I'll increase the scale here to 60%. Then I'll click OK to apply it. Now I'll duplicate that layer, double-click Pattern Overlay. I'll increase the scale up to 80% and click OK. Now I'll duplicate that layer, double-click Pattern Overlay, increase the scale to 100%, and click OK. And finally, I'll duplicate that layer. Then I'll double-click Pattern Overlay. This time, I'll increase the scale all the way up to 500%. Then I'll go up and decrease the opacity to 50%. And click OK. That should do it for my rain layers. I've got rain droplets of all different sizes throughout the whole canvas. But in reality, rain doesn't really come down perfectly straight like that, does it? It usually comes down in all sorts of different angles. Before I rotate these though, I'll have to rasterize these layers so I can rotate the layer and patterns at the same time. I'll just hold the Shift key on my keyboard and click the rain layer on the very bottom to select all the rain layers. Then I'll just right-click one and click Rasterize Layer Style to rasterize all these at the same time. Now, one by one, I will rotate these to the right. I'll start with the top layer. I'll just make sure that just the top layer is selected. Then I'll hit Ctrl-T on my keyboard to bring up Free Transform. Then I'll just rotate this slightly. Not too much, just enough to make it noticeable. That looks about right. I'll hit the Enter key to commit it. Now I'll move on to the second layer directly below it. I'll select it in the Layers panel, then hit Ctrl-T. Then I'll rotate this one a little more than the last one. Nice. I'll hit Enter to commit. Then I'll go to the third layer, go into Free Transform, rotate it even more. Then I'll hit Enter. Then I'll go to the fourth layer. I'll go into Free Transform, rotate it even more, then hit Enter. Then I'll go to the fifth layer, go into Free Transform, rotate it, and hit Enter. Finally, I'll go to the sixth and final layer, go into Free Transform, rotate it, then hit Enter. That should do it for the rain layers. I'll use my Zoom tool to zoom back in. Then I'm going to merge all these rain layers together. With the bottom rain layer still selected, I'll press and hold Shift on the keyboard. Then I'll click the top layer to select all of them. Now to merge these into one layer, I'll just right-click one and click Merge Layers. Perfect. So far, this image has all the elements of a storm except for one: lightning. To create lightning, I'm basically going to use my brush tool to make the basic shape of a lightning bolt. Then I'll use layer effects to make it look more realistic. I'll go to the bottom of the layers panel and make a new blank layer. Then I'll go over to the tools panel and get my brush tool. I'm going to make sure that the hardness is at 100% and the size should be around 6 pixels or so. I'll make sure that I'm painting with white. Then I'll start brushing in the canvas where I want the lightning to strike. I think I want the lightning to strike the top of this umbrella. So I'll click here. Then I'll just press and hold Shift as I make random jagged strokes towards the top of the canvas. Nothing too fancy, just making a random enough looking jagged bolt towards the sky. Okay, that'll work just fine. Now, to apply a glow effect to this bolt, I'll go down to the bottom of the layers panel, click the layer effects button, and I'll select outer glow. From here, I'll go to the glow color and change that to pure white and click OK. Then I'll go up to blend mode and switch that from screen to vivid light. Now I'll go down to technique and I'll switch this from softer to precise. And finally, I'll skip ahead and increase the size to 155. Then I'll just play with the opacity slider on top until my original lightning bolt has disappeared. Very nice. I'll go over and click OK to apply this. This lightning bolt looks great, but it has a problem. It's supposed to be going behind these umbrellas. Instead, it's going right in front of them. Fortunately, I already have a mask to mask out these umbrellas. I'll just go down to my cloud layer that I made in the beginning, then I'll press and hold my Alt key and drag its layer mask up to my lightning layer. Perfectly done. Now, as a final touch, I just want to bring a little of that lightning back into the umbrellas. So, with the layer mask still selected, I'll go up to the layer mask properties and reduce the density to around 90. Very nice. Now it looks like the lightning bolt is bright enough to shine through the umbrellas a bit. One thing that's really neat about this basic style of lightning is that I can always select my lightning layer and continue to add lightning bolts if I want. Look at that. Awesome. Now it really does look like a storm, and these men have a reason to be panicking around all over the place. Very cool. So in this tutorial, we went over how to use render clouds to create a gloomy sky. We ran over how to create a rain pattern and apply it to our image in as many layers as we want. And we went over how to create realistic lightning bolts absolutely from scratch. That will do it for creating weather in Photoshop. I'll go over another effect and technique in the next video.